faucet holding your
The last thing the Supreme Court could shock us. There'll be no more self-soothing, and effectively everyone is teeing up for the fact that they will likely, and this case is going to be delayed until June, which actually which has impacts on Jack Smith's case, because it means the Jan 6 case might hinge on this case. So it further punts that until, farther and farther down the year. Who knows if it'll make it before the election. But it looks like they're going to give this win to Trump. You commit crimes while you're in office, you can't be held criminally liable for those crimes.
Well, they don't want to, probably, I always guess there's the sort of weird reverence for, well, this branch shouldn't be affecting or influencing this other branch, right? I'm sure there's some sort of thing sitting there that sits in the back of their mind. And I think, secondly, this is the dream of Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld manifest. I mean, this idea of the unitary executive is not starting with Trump. I mean, this has been going on for, again, decades. This is the thing that blows my mind, too, is you would think that, history started, 15 years ago. We just completely dismissed. I wonder if this happened in the 20th century. Was it 1910 and everyone's just fuck the 19th century. We don't care. We don't know about any other. What? I don't understand it. And I would say that you see these problems will continue because it's as if we are trying to do high volume internet work and video editing on a Windows 93 computer. We are refusing. And I think we know why we're afraid to have constitutional conventions or to have real radical re-examination of our laws, of our internet broadcast. What is the FCC doing about all the broadcast that happens outside of airways? There's just no regulation. And I'm not saying that regulation is necessarily a good thing, but we have no examination of what we're doing at this point. It's all just free flying. And then we refer back to these sort of systems that are really faulty and not even designed for now. So the question is, do we ever update our operating system, or do we continue to try to use 225-year-old thinking to apply to a world that has moved on and most other nations have moved on?
But what's funny about that, Anthony, is that even within our Constitution, I'm saying the Section 4 of the 14th Amendment or whatever, the one that says hey, if you aid and abet an insurrection, you can't hold office.
Right.
Even the things that were put into our Constitution because of the way that our country developed, because of the Civil War, even we can't even make good on that. So we're not even utilizing what the operating system has given us.
No.
And I do want to ask Max, because I want to put this question to you, Max, and I want you to explain it to us, because I think what we've described through, the police state reaction to peaceful protesters, to the inability to take our money out of, weapons and war, and the just open lobbying of Congress people for that end, to the destabilization of the Middle East, which inevitably creates blowback on us. And then we're told that Trump will be somehow worse. And then we're told that Project 2025, for example, this Heritage Foundation wish list is coming down the pike. And in some ways, my question is Project 2025 and what the right wants to do in this country, is it really all that different than what they've actually been successfully doing for decades now, that the Democrats haven't mounted any kind of defense or oppositional vision or new operating system, to put it in Tony's terms, to mount any kind of defense against?
So I see Project 2025, which is, as you said, it's the Heritage Foundation led document, but there's over 100 think tanks, agencies, organizations, and nonprofits that have signed on to it as supporting sponsors, and multiple authors that aren't just, it was coordinated by Heritage, driven by Heritage. Mm-hmm. It is, I see it as sort of like the Republican Party, this new Republican Party's doctoral thesis. This is the capstone research project. And I think that they are even a little bit surprised at how far they've been able to push this. Mm-hmm. So, the corollary that we can draw with the Trump case, the immunity case sitting in front of the Supreme Court, is that this Supreme Court isn't acting at Trump's behest. Trump is a fool. He's a great marketer. He's all the things that we know him to be, but he himself is not a deeply read individual. This isn't somebody that really cares about where he lives in history. It's just about how much power I have at this moment.
Right.
It's the actors behind the scenes, like Leonard Leo, that they're working at the behest of. And behind Leonard Leo, there's a cadre of billionaires. The problem with talking about Project 2025, talking about the Federalist Society, talking about the Cato Institute, talking about Mercatus, or any of these other organizations that craft these policies, is that what they propose is so outlandish that you almost feel conspiratorial saying it out loud. Mm-hmm. And they can turn it back on you and be like, what are you, nuts? That's not at all what we want. We are for freedom. We're for liberty, family values, and a strong economy that we can all, and all of those things.
Unless you're trans.
Right? I mean, we can all agree, right? Come on.
Right.
That's the great unifying message that didn't fucking work in the midterms. I don't understand why they keep pursuing it. Anyway, so Project 2025, we did a deep dive on it. It's 900 pages long. Wow. And I am a masochist, and so I read it because I've been studying the Heritage Foundation for a long time. The Heritage Foundation is more responsible for who we are as a nation today than probably any other organization. You've talked about a small organization that punches so far above its weight, starting with the Reagan administration, where they bragged that 60% of their policy papers actually made it into law and or executive orders. And then they all got drafted into the administration. But what's so interesting about it, and what we framed the piece that we did on it as Republicans with time. Anytime Republicans find themselves out of power, they don't just hang out and wring their hands. They get really busy. And they create these policy papers and they say, okay, so we're out of power for this minute and a half. What are we going to do next? How are we going to reframe this issue? We see it time and time again. So we saw it when they found themselves suddenly, unexpectedly out of power with Jimmy Carter coming into office. And they were able to put themselves back together and form all of these neoliberal, anti-democratic organizations to create policy papers that guided the Reagan administration.
Right.
When Clinton came into office, nobody was more surprised than the Bush team and that entire side of the universe. And they created the Project for a New American Century, which basically created the pathway for the new military and surveillance state that we had. They had it all written out.
Right. But what's time out? Because like you mentioned this in your video and your episode, because what's funny about when Clinton came to power is that like Clinton arguably adopted all of their fucking Reaganite, like previous neoliberal policies. I mean, not totally, but like effectively,
More so.
Yeah, like welfare reform and criminal justice reform and all the other reforms that, came down.
He wanted to put his stamp on. He wanted to convert that Bush 1 shit into Clinton stuff so that then he could claim this credit for shifting. We're not your Jimmy Carter. We're not Jimmy Carter anymore, man. We're the new we're a new Democrat.
Right.
The new Democrats are the closest thing to the realized vision of the original neoliberals, like the professional neoliberals, not the ones that became the Warhawks and the Cheneys that split off and were completely villainous.
Who are still neoliberals that everyone forgets they're also neolibs, but they're neocons and neolibs, and you can be the same. You can both be both.
Yeah, it's a tough marriage, but it's for them very successful. And so when the Clinton years are, we were joking about the 90s before. The 90s were awesome. Anthony, you and I are about the same age, and we had a lot of fun. We were also asleep at the switch because the new Democrats really that was sort of the pinnacle of neoliberalism as we kind of cascade out of this, whatever this new era is becoming, and out of neoliberalism, which is into more oligarchy than anything else, where we are purely driven by corporate greed and the demands of the corporate class. That time in space showed the Republicans a lot. The contract with America under Gingrich and all of the party acolytes there was basically the neoliberal playbook. And Clinton said, I'll do you one better. I'll make everything tougher. And I mean, this is a man who left the campaign trail to go execute an impaired person in Arkansas on the campaign trail to demonstrate that he would be tough on crime and stand behind the death penalty. So all of those things that came into the 2000s that gave George Bush the ability to even manage the world the way he did were really founded under the Clinton administration. Project 2025 is the culmination of Republican mindset and the think tank's ideas about what can happen next. And by next, I mean, how much more can we roll back?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because—
what else haven't we taken? What else haven't we, like, invasion of the body snatchered?
Yeah. Well, and how do you do it where everyone is still consuming and fixated on small things? Because that's part of it, is you can't have the society go spinning out of control. You've got to keep people consuming, spending, and working while this stuff— That's what the strategy.
Blaming immigrants.
That's what I assume, Max, in that reading of it, is that's a lot of it, is the way to navigate this so that everyone still sort of just sees everything somewhat the same with just inconveniences.
The grand distraction machine that you were talking about with the proliferation of social media has been to their great benefit, without a doubt. And makes it sort of a curious move, although it's a whole separate topic we can talk about potentially banning TikTok. But yeah, they need us distracted, they need us angry, and they need us fed just enough and making just enough money and having just enough in the bank and debt that isn't always going to crush us to keep us in this zone so they can pass all these other things. And what's interesting about 2025, and we could talk about a handful of them or just say broadly, they're all achievable. Every single line item that they have in here is achievable either through executive order or codifying it to the US code or passing legislation. And the nightmare scenario that is facing progressives, Democrats, well, humans, let's just say, this is probably, how we always say it's the most consequential election in our lifetime?
This one's it.
This could be it. I know it sounds hyperbolic, but this could be it, because what we see under Biden is not great. But the Trump plan, the 2025 plan, he will put all of this into play, and it impacts union workers, a federal abortion ban, eliminating at state agency level any talk of DEI, eliminating and criminalizing anybody that is not gender presenting from how they what their birth, right, where they were at birth.
It is also seems like it is rolling back, like a full rollback of the civil rights movement, like a full let's go back to when America was great, which was, before, Black Americans, gay Americans had full rights. And let's extend that to immigrants, Latinos. Like, this is like the rollback feels complete, but the newness is like just how much of an oligopoly it can become and how corporate run it can become.
Yeah, it's a war on entitlements for sure. It is a war on marginalized people for sure. There are tax provisions that they're floating, a simple and just and a fair 2-tier tax system, 15 and 30%. That's it. You don't have to worry about anything else. Without, of course, recognizing that 40% of this country does not pay income taxes because they simply don't have enough money to put bread on their table. Yeah. They're going to have to pay 15% in taxes now. I mean, it goes on. And the strangest part about it is they list countries by name that they want to give the president the executive authority and the authorization to intervene and meddle into their elections and into their countries, or just to execute coups without asking for congressional oversight into anything that we do. So imagine General Soleimani's assassination, but everywhere. They're trying to codify that into law. They're so very close to doing almost everything in this document, and it will be the end chapter. So as we sit back and we hear things like, oh, this is a fight for democracy, it's a fight for a really shitty democracy at this moment.
Yes.
Versus fascism. And I think that's why we're all having an existential crisis, because we kind of understand this at a visceral level and nobody's getting it right.
I appreciate it. I also want to just put up Can't Ever Die's a tweet that I very much enjoy that sort of feels like it wraps this episode. They write, "Stop blaming President Joe Biden for not doing anything about the police violence and funding the Israeli occupation. He's just a little guy. Presidents are weak. Plus, you don't understand. If he loses, Trump will become president and have unlimited power.
He's just a little guy who lives in tiny Hamas.
He's just a little guy.
Little Gaza.
He lives in a little Gaza.
He's just a little guy who lives in little Gaza.
Little Gaza, but President Trump lives in big Israel.
He shits on a golden toilet."
Yeah, but that to me also kind of encapsulates this. It's like we have this window. Like, the election is not tomorrow. It is in 6 months. Biden's been nibbling around the edges. Like, here, have this, have that. We're doing this, we're doing that. But on the big stuff, on the vision, on the give us a fucking reason, he's fumbling, he's fucking up. And I do think we are halfway to Project 2025, but for sure it is a grand departure to actually enact it. And it is very scary that a lot of those things can be done by executive order. And that some of the people like Stephen Miller, who wrote chapters of Project 2025, will likely be in the cabinet. I mean, Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon are these perfect little like they're the only two guys that
bros,
just like
D&D bros.
D&D bros that
that's what they are.
Yeah, and they also are very honest. Like, they're the only people who are like honest. Like, remember when they stopped putting Stephen Miller on air because he was like too fashy, and they were like, whoa.
That's what I love about Bannon is Bannon just says exactly what's going. He's not disguising it. He's saying it, and I do at least appreciate that they say it, so you know where they're coming from, in the sense of appreciating how to attack it. But listen, I think that at minimum,
Naomi Klein did great work on that, because she listened to him and she was like, "Oh my goodness, everybody needs to really pay attention to the words that are coming out of his mouth. He means it."
And Bannon loves the idea that Biden is getting hammered on Israel and Gaza stuff, right?
Yeah.
And he also, because he knows that the left is souring on him. We saw, and I've said this before, but Anthony, to your point about Donald Trump, I mean, he's such an opportunist that he's almost running to the left of Biden in some instances on this. He had a tweet recently or whatever on Truth Social that was like, Biden hates Israel. He hates Israel. But I guess he hates Palestinians more.
Yeah.
And it was like,
he's so good. Honestly,
he's
the fucking best. He's the best.
So good at it.
Damn.
He's so good at it, and he does really call it, and it is like the saddest display to watch. Whatever cabal of morons is over in the Oval, the number of pencil-tied fucking guys in their 30s and 40s who are having Michelin star meals every night in DC and crafting their bullshit middle of the road. They can't even do what Reagan did. I mean, even Reagan smacked the Israelis on the nose when they got too out of control.
Right.
And it is amazing to me that he is just, and it seems like it is a personal, private conviction of his.
Yes.
And
very much.
It makes
Golda Meir gave him the hand job of a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so irritating to see him that this is where he's going to dig in and then kill things that I know there's no grand vision, but I'm going to tell you, 20-year-old me, whoa, you mean it's only $8 if I overdraft my account versus 35? It's only this much. That shit mattered if I was 20.
Sure.
And so what kills me is it's not like he's some grand visionary, but there's all these little chunks.
Yeah.
Right?
There are good things.
And lead up to this idea of, even though I don't think it's actually going to happen, even if he gets elected, that they're going to create some, congressional codification of Roe, but at least that there's some attention to that. And it's just all blown away by something so reckless and stupid by the leader of a country who is a radical religious lunatic, a violent war criminal, and wants your opponent to win the election. That's
Ding,
what's
ding, ding.
crazy to me.
That loves your opponent, was the first person
Yeah.
to call your opponent to congratulate him on winning in 2016. That was Bibi Netanyahu. But anyway, we have to leave it there.